Well, first off, thank all of y'all for being here with us tonight. We got another good, I think overall things are kind of down tonight, but we still got a good crowd in here. And so I'm thankful for that. I appreciate y'all coming. We appreciate the ones going to tune in and join us on Facebook tonight. Open your Bibles to the book of Ruth. We're going to go almost to the end of chapter 2. We've only got 2 or 3 verses here left in chapter 2, so we'll knock those out, and then we'll move on into chapter 3. Judy was asking me earlier if I'd finally decided where we were going to start Sunday morning. Going to go into a book that I've never done as a sermon series. I have taught it in Sunday school probably a couple of times. We're going to start up Sunday morning in the book of 1 John. There's reasons for that. There's a lot of relevance to things that are going on in the world today. And so that's kind of led me there, but it's a great book of theology and a book about love. And I think heaven truly knows that we could use a whole lot of that in this world right now. And so there's going to be, I think, some fantastic lessons for us in the book of 1 John. And it's a book about doctrine. And one of the things that's led me there is I have not checked in today on the places I've been reading it, but there was big votes going on in our convention today, battles that's been going on over doctrine. I don't know how those votes went. About 11,000 people down there to vote this morning. And so when I figure everything out and get a chance to read all of it, I'll probably share a little bit with the church Sunday. We're all Southern Baptists. We all want to know what's going on. And so I've been trying to keep up with it, but it's been a difficult 2 weeks as far as a lot of people fighting and battling with each other. And, you know, we'd love to think that it doesn't have to be that way, but if you start trying to stand on Scripture and what it actually says, it's not going to be popular for most of the world. And so believe me, if everything they were trying to pass today passes, you won't have to wait to hear it from me. It'll be on the NBC News, CNN, Fox, everywhere, because they love every year to share with the whole world, in their mind, how backward we Southern Baptists are, because we think you should just do what the Bible says. And so, you know, we'll see how it goes, but watching all that happen and realizing sometimes we're not very good at arguing with each other. Sometimes it seems like as church members, we should be able to see things different and still keep some love and respect in there. And sometimes we can act as bad as the lost world around us does. And so I think 1 John's got a lot of good messages for all of us. And every time I say that, I want y'all to know that if I'm going to start a sermon series, a lot of times it's going to be something that I know I need to hear too. So, okay, not just you, but me also. So join me tonight down in verse number 20 of Ruth chapter 2, and we'll kick right on in. We dealt with this verse last week, but I want to go back and read it again because I think I said this last week, but it becomes one of the key parts of this book. And it becomes the real Jesus connection here in this book. And what I mean by that is Boaz is a picture of Christ here in this Old Testament story. And it's going to be because of who Boaz is going to become in this book. So let's go back and read verse 20, and we'll catch back up on it real quick, and then we'll move right on from there. It says, "Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, 'Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead. And Naomi said to her, this man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives. Now, if you remember, I told you that what we're going to see is Boaz is going to take on the legal role here as this book goes forward of being Ruth's kinsman redeemer. And if you remember, the kinsman redeemer this is part of Jewish law. This was not just a tradition. This was written up in Jewish laws back then. There was a lot of things that a kinsman redeemer could do for an immediate family member. They could become the person who would redeem a person out of literal slavery. As I've said many times, when we think of slavery, slavery to us is always about one race enslaving another. Most of the history of the world, it has not always been based on race. It is often, especially in Jewish times, it was usually about one country conquering another one and taking everybody they wanted as slaves. I mean, back then, I really believe that one of the reasons our country has been blessed, we've been one of the only countries in history that would defeat another country and not take all of their money and all of their stuff and all of their people and bring them back over here and make them work for free, okay? Sometimes I think maybe we've wound up in messes because we've done too much at times to rebuild some countries that attacked us. And then what do? Sometimes they come back and attack us again. But the United States is one of the few nations in the history of the world that has tried to be humane in warfare. And that is very unusual. But also, debt put a lot of people into slavery. Even in the New Testament, when it talks about slavery, many of those people were in slavery because of debt. If you fell into a huge debt to someone and you couldn't pay it, and you had a son, for example, let's just say you had a 16-year-old son, well, they're like, all right, I'll take the boy. Because a 16-year-old boy is exactly who you'd like to have out there working in your crop fields. And so there would be an arrangement made, and they would come and take your son, and if the deal was in 5 years of him working, that pays your debt off. So let's just say that you had a relative who's like, you can't let them have your son. We got to do something. And this relative had the means to do it. He would redeem that person out of their slavery typically by paying their debt. Well, I think we pretty much understand that redemption, New Testament wise, when it comes to us, the reason we are free is because we have been redeemed. We were bought out of the slavery of sin because there was a price that had to be paid to set us free, and the price was the blood of Christ, okay? They could also, if a family got into economic hardship, we'll move it into the way we would talk about it here. Let's just say you're about to lose the family farm. The family farm's a big deal. Here in West Kentucky, we've got so many farmers, and some of them are 4th, 5th, 6th generation on the same land. And sadly, some of those farms still wind up for sale at tax sales because eventually, no matter how hard the family works, they're going to lose it all. Well, if you had a family member who had the ability to stop that from happening, they would do everything they could, because for the Jewish people, land was a big deal to them, just as it is a big deal to people today. Okay? And then what we're going to really see here is a person could redeem someone through the Jewish law of levirate marriage. that levirate marriage was still practiced all of the time in the New Testament during the time of Jesus and Paul and John and all of them. And quite simply, what that was is, let's say two people got married and the husband died. And if the husband had a brother, and typically that was where you would start, okay? So the idea was his brother needs to marry the widow, give her a child that would then be raised as an heir to his brother who died. It was a way to honor your brother. But if you didn't have a brother, then it could go on to an uncle or a cousin, someone in the family who would step up, because quite simply, as important as land was to the Jewish people, genealogy was even more important. It was a big deal not to let the family name pass away, okay? So if you keep the idea here of Boaz as the kinsman redeemer, then this book begins to really unfold. So let's go on and look at verse 21 through 23. It says, "Then Ruth the Moabitess said, he also said to me," here speaking of Boaz, "You shall stay close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest." And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, and that people do not meet you in any other field." Okay. Naomi, let's remember, in case you might have forgot, and I'm sure you probably haven't now, we've been in here a couple of weeks. Naomi is the mother-in-law, and Ruth is the daughter-in-law, okay? Both of them lost their husbands. They're here. They are both widows, and Naomi is doing everything she can to take care of her daughter Ruth, who was a foreigner, but has confessed faith in the God of Israel, has turned from the gods of her youth, the little g gods, as I say all the time, and has become a believer. And she was gleaning in a field and met this man named Boaz. And Naomi quickly realizes, he is a relative of my husband's who passed away. And when he met Ruth, he said to her, "Listen, do not go into anybody else's fields but mine." And he is taking care of her by doing that. Because, and you know what's interesting? Look at verse 21 again. Ruth the Moabitess. It is amazing how many times she gets called that in this book. And I don't think it's a coincidence, because I don't think anything in the Bible is ever a coincidence. It keeps reminding us of who she is. I believe it's because, excuse me, let's remember, Ruth the Moabitess has absolutely nothing going for her in Israel where she is right now. She's a foreigner, and not only foreigner, the Moabites were major enemies of Israel. So here she is finding grace as a foreigner, a stranger, and an enemy. You go to the New Testament, and what you're going to find out is every one of us in this room, it tells us that at one time in our life, we were foreigners, we were strangers, and we were enemies of God. She's all three. This book is about the grace that is going to be shed on her by the kinsman redeemer. And folks, as I like to say, there's 66 books in the Bible, and they all tell the exact same story about the grace that has been shed on people by God, okay? So this is the exact same faith. She should be treated like who she is. And yet, not only did Boaz tell her that she could not only glean, which is picking the scraps up, she could reap, which is taking it straight off of stalk. In other words, no, don't pick up the trash. You are welcome to take my best. Not only that, he then told some of his men, go even further than that, just spill some of it so it's just laying there for her. She is being shown grace here. If she goes into any other Jewish person's field, most likely she's not going to find this grace. Okay, they don't know who she is, and when she goes over there, you know who she is? Ruth the Moabitess. But here in Boaz's field, she is being treated almost as if she is family. As I said, she was a stranger in Israel, a stranger here in Bethlehem, and a literal enemy of God just a little bit ago. And now Boaz is treating her with amazing grace, as I like to say it. You know, over my many years of preaching and teaching and such, I've shared a lot of things about who I was in my past. And sometimes I've literally had people tell me, they're like, listen, that was 30 something years ago. Why do you bring that back up on yourself? And I'm like, because I want people to understand just how amazing grace is. Listen, great sinners, they get to tell great stories of amazing grace. Now, I want you to understand, God never put me in places I wasn't supposed to be so that years later I could share stories of His grace. If I could go back and change my life and change my testimony, I would change it back to some other people's testimony, which I was 15 years old. The Lord saved me, and I have been faithfully serving Him ever since. I wish that was my story. It's not my story. Some people it is. Some people almost make the mistake sometimes of thinking that it would take more grace to save me than it would take to save the person who gave their life to Christ at 15 and was faithful. No, it took the exact same amount. It took all of it. As I like to say, it took every drop of Christ's blood to save a person who was saved at 10 and was a faithful follower for 60 years, as it did to save a person who was a sinner for 60 years and a faithful follower for 10 days. Sometimes it's easy, or I guess I should say it's hard for us to not think of the fact that there's never actually been a person who could be saved with a little bit of grace or a little bit of Christ's blood. It took it all. And the greatest sinner and the person who committed the least amount of sins ever before becoming a Christian, they both took every drop to be saved. Because the first sin we ever committed, knowing it was a sin, was enough to get us the death penalty. And we had to be redeemed, and our sins had to be paid for. And whether Christ paid for one sin in somebody's life or a million sins in their life, it took every bit of amazing grace God could offer and every drop of blood that Christ's body had in it. So I think this story keeps going back and calling her the Moabitess because it wants us to remember who she was, because we're getting a picture of who she actually is now. And it is not the same person. So let's move on to chapter 3. You're going to have to give me just a second. I got to flip over here from one screen to another if I can get this thing to go. So we're going to pick up, all right there, I've got it, maybe. Okay. Join me and let's read verse 1 down through verse number 5. Beginning in chapter 3. I think I actually forgot verse 23 in chapter 2, so let's read it real quick, and then we'll just roll on down to verse 5 in chapter 3. It says, "So she stayed close by the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law." Now beginning in chapter 3. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor." Now let's stop right there for a minute, and then we'll come back. First off, I've been really impressed with myself in this because I have a hunting farm that I hunt on that's in Bowes, Kentucky. And when the last time I did this, I called him Bowes about 10 times. I've managed to not call him Bowes yet. I've called him Boaz every time. Bowes is literally just down the road from where we live. But I just hit me. I thought, I remember how much trouble I had when I was doing this of calling him by the wrong name. So I'm thankful for that. But listen, what we're going to see here is a pretty nifty plan that I could see where some people might look at this when we get to it and think there's some manipulation going on here. We're going to deal with it and look at it. But quite simply, what we're doing here is Naomi has come to realize that there's some kind of connection that has happened between Ruth and Boaz. And it's not just Boaz being just kind to her. And she sees that. And so, listen, she is, remember, this is her daughter-in-law, but she calls her daughter. And her daughter-in-law calls Naomi her mother. They're very close. She's going to play the role of a good mother here because she sees a possibility that is not just some circumstance. There is Jewish law and Jewish tradition behind what she has seen here. So there in verse 1, playing the role of a Hebrew mother, she is seeking to find Ruth a Hebrew husband. And in that sense, I want you to remember that whether she thinks of it at that time or not, she has prayed for Ruth and Ruth's other sister-in-law, Orpah, remember, she stayed in Moab. But in chapter 1, verse 9, and you can look at that if you want to, but here's what she said to them. "The Lord grant that you may rest each in the house of her husband." Remember, she told her two daughter-in-laws, you should stay here in your own country, find you a husband, and my prayer for you is that both of you find good husbands and that you have a good life, but you should not come back with me to Israel. And she realized, you are foreigners and enemies of Israel. If you come, I have no idea what's going to happen to you. Naomi knew, I can go back home. This is where I'm from. I'm from Bethlehem. These are my people. This is my husband's family there in Bethlehem. But now she realizes, I could still find her a husband, but not in Moab, here with my people, with God's people, a Hebrew husband. And I believe she has come to see that the opportunity here is so great that it must be almost amazing to her. Because When she came home with Ruth to Israel, I want you to remember, she said, I am living under the curse of God, basically. God has stricken me. She felt like God was angry with her, that she's under God's judgment. And that's part of the reason she told her daughter-in-laws, y'all should stay here and when she gets back home and meets the women in Bethlehem and they say, wait, is that Naomi? You remember what she said? Don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara, because my life is so bitter that I should be called bitter. And all of a sudden, this daughter-in-law, who is now taking care of Naomi by bringing food home to her, meets this man, and I think Naomi believes there is a spark there. Now, I really don't believe, because Naomi is a godly woman, that she thinks this is just a physical spark, if you will. Because without the law of the Goel, the kinsman redeemer, there is really no way, no matter what this spark was, that this could ever work out. But because of God's law and the laid out possibility that Boaz might become kinsman redeemer, Naomi realizes that there's a real possibility for something here. So what she says to her is, listen, Boaz is going to be working tonight on the winnowing floor. Now, I think most of y'all probably understand what winnowing grain is, but it was pretty simple. They would harvest up the grain, and then you would toss the grain up into the wind, and the heavy stuff would fall, and the light stuff would blow away. So the idea is the good stuff will come here, and the chaff, the junk, will blow away. So from everything I've read, what that probably tells us here is this is taking place late in the day. And once I read this, it made perfect sense, because that's usually when the wind is strongest, late in the afternoon. So they would go out in the fields early in the day and they would harvest. And then late in the afternoon, when the winds picked up as the heat rose, that was the perfect time to go into the winnowing barn or whatever they had there and to winnow out this grain. So they would throw it up in the air and take the grain and let the chaff blow away. Now, then they would pick up the good stuff, put it in bags, and they would save it for later. Of course, they would grind it and do all kinds of stuff with the barley. Okay, mainly making bread and things out of it. So let's go back to verse 3 again and then read down through verse 5. Here is Naomi's plan for Ruth. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself. Put on your best garment and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Let's stop right there for a minute. The first thing that is easy to overlook here is that the actual idea of Boaz becoming a kinsman redeemer, he should be doing it for Naomi, not Ruth. Because Ruth has no legal thing to call upon. She is not from Israel. This does not apply to the rest of the world. A lot of people don't think about that. You realize the Bible's not written to the world. The Bible is written to people who follow it. Almost when you look at all of the rules that the Jews lived under, God didn't write those. God never told the Moabites not to eat pork. He only told the Jews not to eat pork. Almost everything in the Bible is written to people who are going to believe it, people who are following it. It naturally teaches believers how we should live, because it's very clear if a person doesn't believe in God, they don't care what the Bible says, okay? Well, the laws here would apply the same way. Now, most likely, Ruth is of an age where she is past childbearing age, because her sons, if you remember, were old enough to be married. Now, you know, that can get a little complicated back in the day, because people got married many times very early. And even up until 100 years ago, that was pretty common. My Granny Bogard, that you've heard me talk about many times, my Granddaddy Bogard was 17, Granny Bogard was 14 when they got married. One of the reasons why I was so blessed to have so many grandparents is because when your great-grandmother gets married at 14, and then your grandmother gets married at 18, and then your mom is born shortly after that, and then when you come along, your great-grandmother's only in her early 70s, you know? So, I mean, a lot of people grow up and never even meet a great-grandparent because, you know, they were 85 years old if they even lived that long. Well, because that was pretty common around here, that's one of the reasons why my family was so big and I was so blessed with all of that. And you've heard me say before, either me or another pastor, that most people believe that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was likely either 14 or 15 years old when he was born to her. So that was very common. But here, she is the Hebrew and Boaz is a relative of her husband. So Naomi is putting aside her rights and seeking, if you will, to transfer them over to Ruth. The book of Ruth is filled with examples of people showing godly love to other people. I mean, Ruth and her sister-in-law Orpah both loved their mother-in-law. Mother-in-law loved both of them. Now, Naomi is the one here who could say, I am the one who needs to be redeemed, but instead she is going to try to redeem her daughter-in-law, quite simply because she loves her. I think her plan here is pretty interesting because it sounds pretty much like something a mama might do today. She literally says to her, hey, clean yourself up real nice, put on your best clothes, fix your hair real good, spray on some good smelly stuff, and then go to meet this young man. You know, we live in a world where people are attracted to each other physically, and that's just how it is.
Sounds like a Rita song.
It does. Yes. Fancy? Okay, you got me there. Made me think of that. I mean, literally, she says to her, hey, he's a man, you're a woman, dress yourself up, spray on your best cologne, and become very attractive to this young man down there. You know, the Bible doesn't try to make us pretend that some of these things aren't real. Listen, it is very real. Men are attracted to women, okay? And God made it that way, and God made women beautiful in men's eyes, and that's how it is supposed to be. And it always has been. If anybody tries to be so high and holy in the world today that they tell you, well, looks shouldn't matter. Well, I'm sorry. I don't know what world you live in, but that don't work. It just doesn't. That's not how life is. We can try to make it out as if, well, all that should matter is what's inside of a person. Well, that's exactly right, but that's never how it starts. And so being a good Jewish mother here, she tells her daughter, as she calls her, here, I've got a plan for you. So let's look at the rest of it. She says in verse 3, wash yourself and anoint yourself, put on your best garment, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies. And you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do. And she said to her, all that you say to me, I will do. Now, I can clearly understand where someone might read this and think, well, this is manipulative. This is a little bit salacious. Sounds to me like Ruth is just throwing herself at him. Somebody might find all of this offensive. We have to understand, number one, this is not the same culture we live in today, and this is Jewish culture. And what is going to happen here is very common and has great meaning. There is big significance to this. What Ruth is about to do was common and was considered extremely moral and was practiced at that time. Here's what it comes down to. Boaz has been in here working. He has worked late. He has finished his work. They have eat and drank, it says, and he is now going to lie down for the night. And so Ruth is told here to go up to where he makes his bed, to pull the cover, which would be the corner of his robe that he would put on to sleep in. And then she will request that he will spread his robe over her. What you're literally seeing here is a marriage proposal. You know, I haven't looked into this as much, but when I was going through Ruth years ago, when I was teaching it at my former church, I did look it up, and I've done just a little research. And you know, in the New Testament, we see these Jewish wedding ceremonies that lasted 7 to 10 days. Those came along later. Back in this time, people were married on the spot. And listen, number one, remember this. We didn't have pastors back then, okay? We didn't have churches back then. We didn't even really, for the most part, have many synagogues at this time. All of their religion was practiced amongst families living out here in the desert. And when two people declared themselves married under the Lord's eyes, they were married. They didn't have to go to the courthouse and pay 25 or 30 bucks to get a license to be married. They didn't have to hire a preacher, and they didn't have to hire a venue. They didn't have to do all these things. They would come together, and in the eyes of the Lord, they declared to the whole world, we are married, and they were married. If you go back and read all through the Bible, you will never find anywhere where it tells you that to get married, you have to say these vows to each other, and you have to walk down this aisle and take pictures, and you have to spend $40,000 and buy. No. They didn't do all that. When she says to him, will you cover me with your robe? It is literally, will you take me as your wife? And interestingly, it is Boaz who has mentioned something about this earlier, even though he was talking about the Lord. But there again, this is not going to be a coincidence either. Over in chapter 2, Boaz literally says to her, I hope the Lord will, quote, bring you under his wing and care for you. Her request here of Boaz is, will you bring me under your care? And Psalm 91:4, which is written by Moses, says this, God will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you shall take refuge. This is what this is built off of. I had something written down in my notes when I was going through them, and I finally remembered the video. I was watching a video back a few years ago, and I had it written down in my notes from Ruth from back a few years ago. Apparently, that week before I preached this particular sermon, I happened to see this particular video. And I remembered the video. It was a video of a hen with about 5 chicks. And she started running around in circles, and the guy grabbed his phone and began to record it because he saw a hawk overhead. And all of a sudden, she made a few sounds, and all the chicks came running to her. And about that time, here came the hawk. And those chicks ran up there, and she spread her wings open. Some of y'all may have seen this before. She spread her wings open. Those chicks ran in there, and she completely surrounded them right before the hawk came down there on them. Well, the hawk did not get any of them, so he made a stab at her, and he missed. And this hen jumped up and grabbed a hold of this hawk and killed it. It was a little small hawk. But the picture of that hen putting her children under her wings is the picture that we're getting here of what Ruth asked Boaz, will you do this for me? Will you spread your robe over me is the equivalent of, as God covers us with his wings, will you cover me with yours? It is a beautiful idea and a beautiful picture, because it again is a picture of what God does for his children. And the Bible actually speaks of God as covering us with his wings 3 or 4 other places, because that's all based off something that people have seen. You know, this is back in the days when everyone raised livestock because it's the only way you could survive. So raising chickens and raising things to eat and to gather eggs and all that was not something people did for a hobby or to make a living. It was something you had to do to survive. And apparently and obviously most people at some time over thousands of years had seen a hen, whether it was a chicken or a turkey, or, you know, in the Bible you find ostriches and all kinds of different animals they were around. But the idea was that when someone is attacking one of God's children, God will spread his wings and cover them and shield them and protect them. And so this marriage proposal is exactly that. Yeah, I admit, it sounds, in our culture, it sounds, I don't really know what word I'd want to use there. It almost sounds a little dirty. She's going to sneak in there and just climb in bed with the guy? No. Because unless Boaz was willing to be her kinsman redeemer, he would not have spread his robe over her. This is not a woman throwing at herself at a man to see, like, if I lay with him here, is he going to give me money and take? No. This is about, will you become my redeemer? There's nothing shallow, there's nothing shocking here. This is a godly thing that is taking place. And Ruth's mother-in-law is the one who told her what to do. Ruth would not have known this custom. This is not something she grew up with. This is Naomi who told her to do it. So let's go on and read verse 6. It says, so she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was cheerful, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. So Ruth does exactly as Naomi has instructed her. Boaz finishes work. He has eat. He is tired. He lays down and he wakes up to find a woman at his feet. Now, I'd have to say that probably was quite shocking to him when this happened, because it's basically like, I'm done for the day. I've eat, I've drank, I'm going to bed because I got to get up and do all this again tomorrow. He lays down and suddenly there is a woman there at his feet. Here again, Ruth is making a request of him to be her Goel. What we see is, well, let's go ahead and read verse 7. No, verse 8, excuse me. Now it happened at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet, and he said, "Who are you?" So she answered, "I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative." Then he said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich." Let's stop right there. Boaz is impressed here and basically says, "I understand that you are a good woman and a good person because you did not choose what most women would have chosen. You did not choose the richest person, and you did not choose the youngest person." As a matter of fact, in one of my study Bibles, it is actually believed that Boaz and Naomi are probably much closer in age than Boaz and Ruth are. So, I guess some people might look at this and say, well, you know, how cool is it that Boaz, was single and available? And here's the truth, it's another picture of God's plan. Listen, Boaz, we've already learned, is a very powerful man. And I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I don't think anybody's going to argue with me. You don't meet a lot of powerful men who are single unless they choose to be. Because when you become powerful in this world, that's very attractive to people. Whether you're a powerful woman or a powerful man, the other sex is going to be very much attracted to you because of who you are. We do not know. It is possible he's been married before and he's a widow. We do not know. But he appears to be a much older man than Ruth, but this touches his heart that she has chosen him. Even though Boaz is a wealthy man, we learned that earlier, he obviously is not the wealthiest man around, because he realizes that she is choosing him not for his age, not for his money, and this says to him, she's choosing me for love, for the right reason. There is no, this is a virtuous woman and a virtuous man being brought together by God. I kind of have, when I've talked many times about my wife and I, we were kind of an odd couple in the sense that, she went to college and was planning on moving out of state like a lot of kids around here do. It's like, I'm going to get out of Kentucky and I'm going to go live in the big city and all of these things. And then she met this country boy who don't even like to go to Paducah. Because I'm like, Paducah's too big. Let me tell y'all, just for a little humor, a funny story here. When I was 15 years old, my parents came in and told me that we were going to move. Now, I'd grown up on my granddad's farm, okay? We're going to move to Benton because my dad had gone in the car business and had a chance to buy a big shop in Benton. I told my mom, I'm staying at Granny's because I ain't living in no stinking big city. Benton. Yeah. To me, I was like, Benton? I mean, it might as well been San Francisco because I lived in between Hardin, Olive, and Aurora. In other words, literally they rolled up the streets when the sun went down. And to me, Benton I was like, no, I'm not. I literally told my parents, I'm not going. I'm staying right here. Me and Tiff were as opposite as two people could possibly be. And we would both tell you that the only attraction between the two of us was I thought she was very attractive and she thought I was very attractive. But here's the amazing thing about God. God has a way of turning odd couples into God couples. And He can do amazing things. We've both said that if you had talked to our friends back then, that they would have said, there is no way. I mean, they're obviously crazy physically attractive. There's no way that's going to last. Because Jeff is one kind of guy and Tiffany is the exact opposite kind of girl. Like, we were just as different as you could possibly be. And we would both tell you today, there's no question our friends were right. But shortly after we got married, we both got saved, and that was the end of that. Because once the Lord took us as His couple and made us into a God couple, then the odd part is done away with. Because the simple truth is, if two people both love the Lord, they've got enough in common right there that God can make an amazing marriage out of it. Despite how different you can still be, all these years that I've been preaching, my wife has told me no telling how many times, Jim, quit saying ain't in the pulpit. I can't quit because that's one of my words and it just comes out, And the good thing is, if I moved up north, that might be a problem. But in Callaway County, nobody cares because we all talk alike. Listen, we are still very different people. But if God takes control of a marriage, He can make amazing things out of it no matter how different people are. And listen, here we have a powerful, wealthy, righteous Jewish landowner who has literally been asked by a foreigner from an enemy nation, will you be my redeemer? And we're going to stop right there tonight. It's a perfect place for us to cut off. Quite simply, think about that for just 1 second. And it's the exact picture of who we are, Ruth. And in this story, Boaz is Christ. Because on the day when you asked the Lord to save you, it was a desperate plea made out of desperation because you were a sinner and you had absolutely nothing to offer Him. And yet He was willing, because of who He was and because He was a righteous and loving God, He was willing to be your kinsman redeemer. That's where the whole book is going, and this is only just another step closer to seeing the literal sovereignty of God that's playing out in this book. Because when we get to the very end of it and find out what God's master plan is at the very end, it is far more than just two people finding someone to spend the rest of their life with. These two people are going to create something that is going to lead all the way to our salvation. That's a shocking statement, but when we get there, you'll see exactly what I mean. And most of you probably know that anyway. I'm sure you've studied this book before. But we'll cut off right here. We'll pick up next week down there, like in verse number 12 or somewhere right in there. I hope y'all have a great rest of the week. Keep Bill Glisson in your prayers. I texted Gina today, and she said he's still in his chair. He's coming along, and he's doing better. But as I told her, I said, I'm sure he is miserable being stuck in his recliner. And she basically said, yes, he is. Because I said, us old men, when we get hurt, we can't bear the thought that we just don't bounce up anymore the next day, and it drives us crazy. So y'all remember him. Tiff and I have a great friend of ours who had surgery today. His name is John Cunningham. John is Graves County attorney over there, and what is it? The Commonwealth Attorney, I think is what he's called. I can't remember. But anyway, John had an emergency surgery a few days ago and had to have another one today. He was a member at our church out there for years, and is really close personal friend. One of my favorite guys. But he's doing good. He should be home now. Last time I spoke to his sister this afternoon, everything had gone good. They had to do some surgery on his liver today. He had a stone in it, and he had some bad infection a couple of days ago. But we think everything's going to work out. But appreciate it if you would keep him in your prayers too. I'm going to ask you if you would join me, and we'll close tonight in prayer. Father, we come before you tonight. We are thankful, Lord, that you were willing to be our Redeemer. I hope I can speak for every person in this room. I don't know anyone's heart but mine, but I know these people and what I believe about them, Lord, and I think they would all echo this prayer, that we're thankful that we who were foreigners and strangers with nothing to offer you, that you were willing to be our Redeemer, just as Boaz, as we will soon see, is willing to redeem Ruth. What a beautiful picture. Lord, we're so thankful for Christ, for everything he's done for us. We're thankful that he was willing to ransom us, willing to redeem us, willing to buy us out of slavery and set us free, and offer us all that is in his field. Lord, no longer would we have to pick up the scraps. He would say to us, everything that is mine is yours because you are an heir. What a beautiful story there, but an even more beautiful for us personally. And we love you and thank you, and we praise everything you do for us in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Thank you, friends. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Facebook friends. We will see you Sunday morning, Lord willing. God bless.